This episode of the Ageless and Awesome podcast is sponsored by the Radiant Reset Hormone Detox Guide for Perimenopausal Women. As a woman in the modern world, our hormones are taking a battering. They're impacted by the food we eat, the toxins we're exposed to, such as when we eat out of plastic takeaway containers, or even worse, reheat food in them. Please don't do this. If you're handling FPOS receipts, filling the car with fuel, eating non-organic produce that hasn't been washed effectively, plus so much more things add to our toxic load every day. Even though our bodies are designed to effectively manage toxins, they haven't evolved as quickly as our toxic world has, unfortunately. So our body does need support. Symptoms such as stubborn weight gain, fatigue, disrupted periods, irritability, and gut health issues can be a sign that you'd benefit from a gentle detox. And that's why I developed the Radiant Reset Hormone Detox Guide for Perimenopausal Women. This free guide has an abundance of information to get you started on your very own DIY detox. And if you'd like to upgrade to VIP, it's only $47 for a limited time. I used to sell this program for $247. The upgrade gives you the recipes, including plenty of plant-based options, the meal planner, the shopping list template, the video workshop, and so much more. Click the link in the show notes to learn more now. Take care of your hormones. They are a critical part of your health as a woman. Hi, I'm Susie Garden, and this is the Ageless and Awesome podcast. I'm an age-defying naturopath and clinical nutritionist, and I'm here to bust myths around women's health and aging so that you can be ageless and awesome in your 40s, 50s, and beyond. The Ageless and Awesome podcast is dedicated to helping women through perimenopause and menopause with great health, a positive mindset, and outrageous confidence. Hit subscribe or follow now, and let's get started. Hello, gorgeous one, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ageless and Awesome podcast. I'm back after having a couple of weeks break off the podcast just to kind of refresh my approach a little, refresh my topics. And so I'm back with fresh new content today. So I want to start this podcast with a question to you. Who likes to sleep in on weekends or on days off and therefore eat later? And it may not even be that you like to sleep in. It could be just that your routine's a little different on weekends, and so your meal times are a little more interrupted and not the same as they are during the week. The reason I'm asking this question is because last week I did some refresher training. I spent 2 whole days doing refresher training on metabolic balance. So metabolic balance is the personalized nutrition program that I use in my signature program, the GLOW protocol. And I also just do it as plain metabolic balance for men because I do work with men as well. And during this refresher training, the concept of metabolic jet lag was discussed. And I'd actually never heard of this before. I don't know if you have. It's also known as social jet lag. Again, never heard of this. And it's got nothing to do really with flying. So I did some reading, and it's actually really interesting and actually very relevant. So I had to share this with you today on the podcast because it especially impacts women during perimenopause, which I haven't really structured that sentence very well. It doesn't especially impact women. It just has some, I think with women in perimenopause, we also have some other things going on in our bodies, which can make the impact of social jet lag or metabolic jet lag even more pronounced, particularly concerning weight management. And I know that that is a big concern with many of the women that listen to the podcast, certainly a big concern with many of the women that work with me. So I really enjoyed having a read about it, and I thought that you would enjoy hearing about it. So let's start by understanding what it actually means. What is metabolic jet lag? So in simple terms, we keep it really super simple. It's a disruption of our body's internal biological clock, our circadian rhythm. So you've probably all heard of circadian rhythm. I'm sure you have. So circadian rhythm is essentially this 24-hour cycle that influences a lot of the different physiological processes that go on in our bodies, including our metabolism, our sleep-wake cycles, our hormone release. Many, 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 many different things are all tied into our circadian rhythm. And this clock, this internal biological clock that we call the circadian rhythm, it's deeply tied to our environment. It responds to light. It responds to darkness. It helps regulate when we feel alert through certain hormone release and when we feel tired. So this metabolic jet lag or social jet lag is a disruption of our circadian rhythm caused by some of our specific behaviors. So, and let's get into those specific behaviors, I guess. So when our eating patterns are inconsistent, and this can be because of being really busy, working long hours, having frequent travel. I know in my previous corporate job, I used to frequently travel across Australia during multiple different time zones, and even just the 2 hour, I think 2 hour or 3 hour, I can't remember whether I was living in Sydney or Brisbane when this happened to me, that I remember going to Perth and I kind of crashed in the afternoon. I remember saying to the representative I was working with that day, I was like, I need you to take me back to my hotel. And it was like 2:00 in the afternoon, which was the equivalent of either 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, my body clock time, but I just was struggling. So even that small time difference can make a huge impact on the body, and certainly for me, and at that point I would have only been 40 odd. So yeah, frequent travel can be, and particularly across different time zones. Shift work, that's a big one, and that's another thing that I've had many years of experience when I was a nurse. That made a huge difference to how I felt. The week we used to do 7 nights in a row of shift work, and that was horrible. But this may be applicable to you. Even just changes in routine on your weekends or on your days off or on your holidays can lead to this metabolic jet lag. And it means that our body struggles to sync up its metabolic processes, which are really important, with our irregular meal times. And that can result in issues like fatigue, weight gain, and digestive issues. And you may have noticed this, when you travel, when you're on holidays, when you have a different routine, you may notice that you feel more tired. You may notice that you put on weight more easily, or that you have bloating or something going on with the gut. So this metabolic jet lag has been researched, I would say not particularly robustly, let's put it that way, but there's been quite a bit of interest and research in this, particularly because of the impact on our glucose level. So I'm just going to get into that. And the reason that the impact on the glucose levels is of interest to researchers is because of diabetes and the epidemic of diabetes that we are in the Western world. So, what the research has shown is that metabolic jet lag increases blood pressure, increases levels of something called HbA1c. So this is the blood glucose measurement that takes into account about 3 months of blood glucose levels. So when you go for a blood glucose test, generally there's 2 measures that they do. They do the serum blood glucose, which is what it is right now when the needle hits the skin. And that's influenced by what you've been eating sort of in the hours leading up to the test, or if you've been fasting, that will impact it as well. But HbA1c looks at a particular little, I think it's a protein that sits on, it's glycated hemoglobin is what it's called, and it will give us an indication of what your average blood glucose has been over the previous 3 months. So you can't kind of trick your doctor or your healthcare professional with your blood glucose management, because we look at HbA1c and we can tell, even if your fasting blood glucose is exceptional, if your HbA1c is high, then we know that there's been something going on in your body that's been impacting that, and probably your behavior around food. So we know that this metabolic jet lag increases blood pressure, increases HbA1c. It also is associated with a higher BMI, so our body mass index, also a higher waist circumference. And that is really, really a really critical measure of your metabolic health. And also it's been associated with higher odds of obesity. Really important because obesity can lead to multiple long-term chronic health conditions at any time actually through your life. Interestingly, because a lot of these studies are being done on people with type 2 diabetes, but they found in people with type 1 diabetes, so type 1 diabetes is the one that tends to be childhood or young adulthood diagnosis, and that's where people must have insulin. Whereas type 2 diabetes is more that adult onset where you can get away with dietary management, you can get away with some tablets. Some people do need to go to insulin, but it tends to be further down the track. Whereas people with type 1 diabetes must have insulin. And they found that people with this metabolic jet lag, it actually caused them to need more insulin on a daily basis and worse blood sugar control overall. And that is really important when you're managing type 1 diabetes, because what you really want, you want to avoid hyperglycemia, so too much sugar in the blood, and hypo. Either of those can be very dramatic, very critical health conditions that can lead to hospitalization, even death. So you need to be very mindful. People that have type 1 diabetes know all about this. So this metabolic jet lag is particularly important with type 1 diabetes. But I do want to be clear. More research does need to be done, but that research that they've done so far is looking pretty consistent. So as I mentioned before, for my ladies in perimenopause, is this particularly important to be aware of and perhaps manage? And I'm going to get into management shortly. But for many women in perimenopause, obviously you're getting these fluctuating hormone levels with your estrogen particularly, and more your drop away of your progesterone. And I've talked about it on the podcast before. There's absolutely a tendency towards insulin resistance at this time and also postmenopause. And that can impact your metabolism, your mood, and your energy levels. So when you add metabolic jet lag on top of that, it can intensify symptoms such as weight gain, sugar cravings, fatigue, and sleep disturbances. And particularly if you're already having the sleep disturbances that come with low progesterone, this can just amplify that. So the take-home message is really that our metabolism functions best when we eat in sync with our circadian rhythm. And when we eat at irregular times, such as late at night or on, for example, the weekend, if you sleep in, not having breakfast till say 10 or 11, maybe you then don't eat lunch, or you're having lunch at maybe 2 or 3, or you're just having a big snack then to tide you over to dinner or whatever. This can lead to impaired glucose metabolism, sugar cravings, overeating, fatigue, and weight gain, as well as sleep issues rather. So this is particularly concerning during perimenopause, given the hormonal changes are already kind of putting you at risk for these things, particularly that abdominal weight gain, because that abdominal weight gain is the one that's going to increase your cardiovascular risk, your diabetes risk, all of these things that we don't really want to think about, right? I don't want to think about that. I'm too young to get any of these issues, right? But the thing is, what you're doing now on a daily basis, whether that's with what you're eating, whether it's how you're moving your body, whether it's how you're managing your stress, whether it's your hydration, all of the decisions you're making on a daily basis are impacting your future self, impacting your future health. And so it's really important to be making decisions now that your 60 and 70 and 80 and 90-year-old self are going to be grateful for, because you're going to have a better quality of life. You're going to have less pain in your body. You're going to have better activity. You're going to be able to do the things that you love doing because you've managed your health well right now at this critical time point for health, which is perimenopause. So how do we manage this? How do we mitigate the effects of metabolic jet lag, especially during perimenopause? So here are kind of my 5 tips to doing that. So probably the main one that you may have already guessed from what I've told you about metabolic jet lag, the main one is to maintain your regular meal times. Now, we already know from some of the more recent sleep research that you are way better getting up at the same time every day, regardless of the amount of sleep that you've had. So, for example, if you normally get up, say, for example, me, I normally get up at around 6-ish on a weekday, but sometimes on a weekend, I think it'd be nice to get up at 7 or whatever. Unfortunately, my dogs wake me up, so it's not, I don't really have a lot of choices with regard to that. But we know with sleep, maintaining regular sleep schedule actually helps insomnia. So even if you've been awake for 4 hours during the night, rather than trying to catch up that sleep the following morning and trying to sleep until, say, 8 or 9 o'clock, you're still better off getting up at 6, even if you're dragging yourself out of bed, to try and reset your clock. So maintaining regular meal times is really important. So trying to eat your meals at the same times every day, or, within reason, including on weekends. So ideally you're doing 3 balanced main meals a day and no snacks. And this really helps to align your metabolism with your body's natural rhythms. And this is awesome for your digestion, your gut symptoms, your blood glucose balance, your energy levels, and your ability to maintain a healthy weight. Because if you maintain sort of that 5 to 6 hours between meals, you will get yourself into fat burning zone. Obviously, as long as those meals are well balanced. If you've got too little protein, too little carb, too little fat, you're going to get hungry. So they need to be balanced. Luckily, when I use metabolic balance, all of that is calculated scientifically for me, for my clients. So I know that that's exactly right for that person's body biochemistry, their medical history, their weight loss goal, their metabolic type, etc. So for yourself, if you're not doing that type of program, it's going to be a little bit hit and miss and experimentation, but it's totally doable. It just might take you a little bit of time to do that, but it's definitely worth it. My second tip is what I probably say every week on this podcast is to have whole foods as the majority of your meal. So focusing on your nutrient-dense foods, veggies, fruits, whole grains, lean proteins, healthy fats. This balanced nutrition supports your energy to be nice and stable, helps to regulate cravings, and provides your cells with everything that they need to do their job, to detox properly, to manage your hormone balance. Like, it's just a bit of a no-brainer. Your body knows what to do with whole foods in a way that it simply is not equipped to handle packaged foods or processed foods, lots of highly, like your white foods, your white flour, your white sugar, your white rice, your white pasta, all of those sorts of things. So whole foods is just a no-brainer. The third kind of tip I would give with regard to this is to practice mindful eating. So all that means is just to slow down and be present when you're eating your food, rather than being in front of the TV or being in front of your screen or checking your emails, etc. Being present while you eat actually helps your digestive enzymes be produced, believe it or not. And I can give you a quick example of that right now. Bring into your mind your absolute favorite food, whether that's chocolate, whether that is hot baked bread, whether that is a big plate of like whatever it is, bring that into your mind right now. Think about it, imagine it, And notice if your mouth is watering. Notice if you might feel a bit hungry, or maybe you suddenly have a craving for that particular food. That is part of what we call a cephalic reflex. That's cephalic, the cephalic reflex. So when you are present while eating, that can really help those digestive enzymes get produced. It can help you tune into your hunger and fullness cues so you don't overeat. And that's really critical during perimenopause when cravings can spike. Next tip, stay hydrated. Water is vital for metabolic processes. It also, sometimes our sensation of hunger is actually a sensation of thirst. So if you're fully hydrated, then you know for sure whether or not you're hungry. But it's also just we need water every day for the chemical reactions that go on in our body. So I will always give that water calculation. 35 mils per kilo of your body weight is your ideal amount of water a day. And that includes, if you're not on the GLOW protocol or metabolic balance, by the way, if you are, that's your water intake. But if you're not, that can include things like your herbal teas, not your tea or coffee. It can include your soups or smoothies and things like that, any sort of fluid in your cooking. Again, not if you're on metabolic balance or the GLOW protocol. My fifth tip is to prioritize your sleep. Good sleep hygiene is essential. So aim for a consistent sleep schedule as much as you can. I mean, obviously there are going to be times if you're going out and having a late night, if you're going to bed at like midnight, whatever, sure. I mean, you're not going to be doing that every weekend, probably. But yeah, creating a regular sleep schedule can really help your body recharge. It helps your body regulate your hormone levels because we do a lot of hormone work overnight when we're asleep. We get our glymphatic system working well, which is our brain detoxification. That's really important for helping things like brain fog, cognition, etc. So all of these tips, I'll just run them past you again. Maintain your regular meal times, choose whole foods, practice mindful eating, stay hydrated, and prioritize sleep. This will all help you combat that metabolic jet lag if it impacts you. It's also important to recognize that, everyone's experience with perimenopause is unique. So there may be things that help you identify what works best for you. And particularly if some of this is just not possible, if you're a shift worker, for example, then at least being aware of this issue of metabolic jet lag can, if you have an awareness, and maybe it can help you with your own routines. I know as a previous shift worker myself, you do have control over some of those sleep routines that you have in place. And maybe that might just help you to change some of that. So if you found this episode insightful, please feel free to share it. I love it when people share the podcast. That's how I grow mainly, is that organic sharing. So pop it on your stories, tag me. I would love to hear that or see that you're sharing it, and I'll share it to my stories as well. And don't forget to subscribe so that you get the episode into your device every single week. So I'll be back on Thursday with a new Q&A. Enjoy your week, and I will see you soon. Thanks so much for joining me today on the Ageless and Awesome podcast. If you liked today's episode, please make sure you click the little plus button if you're on Apple Podcasts, or the follow button if you're on Spotify, so that you get each new episode delivered to you every week. If you like free stuff, then head to the show notes and click the link to receive my free Radiant Reset Hormone Detox Guide for perimenopausal women. Or if you'd like to continue the discussion, head over to Instagram and DM me at Susie Garden Wellness. I'd love to connect with you.